Even though they're both dangerous, Donald Trump makes Run to Satanists even more dangerous. Now, Donald Trump was initially treated by the media as a largely harmless curiosity when he's actually causes more harm than usual. And then he was treated as a compelling and fascinating public figure, which he's neither one, um, who was viewed as an insurgent and unconventional. That is when the media began to normalize Trump, even though anything about him is not normal. He showed himself to be a pathological liar, but the news media waited several years to state that obvious fact. As Trump's fascist and demagogue tendencies and plan became even more obvious, the mainstream news media largely continued to treat him as a normal political candidate who, in the end, would be constrained by the country's democratic institutions and norms. After he was installed by Russia in the 2016 election, the mainstream news media continued to insist years into that disaster that Trump at some point would rise to the occasion and make a presidential pivot. Of course, that never fucking happened. Now, Trump, empowered by the news media's normalization of him, would then lead the greatest political crime spree in American history. 7 years later, the mainstream news media is repeating that same pattern of behavior with Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. Now, through his policy, speech, and other actions, DeSantis has proven himself to be a neo-fascist and an authoritarian who treats real democracy and pluralism with contempt. Um, instead of foregrounding those facts in their coverage of DeSantis and his imminent 2024 squadron run, the mainstream news media is consistently describing him with euphemisms and other complimentary language designed to make him sound exciting and compelling, even though he's not. He's not a rock star. He's not a culture warrior. He's not a brawler. As the truism observes, bad habits fucking die hard. And for institutions like the news media, bad habits fucking die hard again and again and again until infinitum, until the lesson is learned too late. Now, um, before, as we explained before in previous talks, DeSantis is no friend of democracy. He is a fascist who is in many ways more dangerous than Trump. Ultimately, there are few, if any, substantial differences between Trump and DeSantis, except in how far their fascism will go, and other anti-democracy beliefs and policies are packaged and presented. Now, in a recent story that is representative of a larger pattern among the country's leading media outlets, the New York Times reported, and they had profiled DeSantis in his attempts to connect with the Republican Party's base voters. The result was predictable. In a mostly flattering and humanizing profile, the Times emphasized DeSantis and his personality in a political horse race instead of the man's values and policies and how they will hurt American people en masse if he becomes a squatter. The headline, "A Glimpse of DeSantis in Iowa, Awkward but Still Winning the Crowd," is a perfect fit for the story, and it's a tale of the big city, fancy, school-educated Floridian trying to connect with the commoners in Trumplandia and other parts of real America. Um, now, there was a woman named Susie Baker who's a native of Iowa. She, dressed in an orange and blue University of Florida hoodie, waited in the crowd of fellow Republicans on Friday morning to meet Ron DeSantis of Florida. She smiled widely and pointed to her hoodie as she told the governor that her son attended college in his home state. DeSantis, dressed in a dark blue suit with a light blue open collar shirt and black boots, stood on the opposite side of a ten metal bike rack separating him from the crowd. He gave a little bit of a nod to Susie Barker and told her about his state's new grandparent waiver that gives tuition breaks to out of state students whose grandparents are Florida residents. Now, Susie Baker, who's a 50-year-old teacher who had driven about an hour to see the Florida governor to see the Florida DeSantis in Davenport, does not have any other family in the Sunshine State, and she narrowed her eyes in confusion at his response. Here she was at an event promoting DeSantis' new book, Shoulder to Shoulder, with a crush of Iowa people eager for face-to-face time with the anti-woke darling of right-wing America, and he was talking waivers. Yeah, the thing is, the Republicans like to talk about people being woke, but they can't give a fucking definition of what the word woke means. DeSantis had quickly scribbled his name with a black Sharpie in her book and smiled. "Go Gators," he told her as he moved on to the next person waiting that signature. The interaction underscored both the promise and the potential pitfall of a squadron bid for DeSantis. His preference for policy over personality can make him seem awkward and arrogant or otherwise astonishing in person, depending on the voter and the success or failure of his one-on-one exchanges. Of course, he's going to be a failure like Trump, so that's going to be expected. Many Republicans view his style as an antidote to the character attacks and the validity that have underscored Republican politics during the Trump era. As the Satanist decides whether to seek the Republican presidential nomination and the squadron nomination in 2024, one of the biggest questions facing the 44-year-old Floridian is his ability to not connect with voters who have had little exposure to him outside of state. And the Times would continue on. The Satanists seemed determined to sign every book and smell for every selfie the crowd wanted, basically a photo op. On Twitter, Mark Jacob, who's a former editor of the Chicago Tribune, who turned media critic, summarized the Times piece. The Washington media crowd keeps covering the rise of fascism from a marketing angle. Author and journalist Jeff Charlotte had highlighted also in a series of posts on Twitter, any media spending time in Trump versus Satanists isn't just playing a horse race. They're actively ignoring the real story, which is that Trumpism, the American strain of fascism, has so thoroughly consumed U.S. politics that only fascists can really contend. Like the mainstream news media, the right-wing kingmakers in the Republican Party and conservative movement, such as the Cook Network, Murdoch, and others in that orbit, are desperately trying to normalize and present the Satanists as a significantly different and by implication preferable option as compared to Trump, which he's not. Neither one of them are preferable. It would be a great error to conclude that they are doing this because of a love of democracy, which, the Republicans don't love democracy, they're against it. The Republican Party and conservative movements elites use Trump and his maggot movement as a type of berserker or blitzkrieg force to smash America's democratic norms and institutions. The Satanists will be used to consolidate their gains as he rolls over a more institutional and permanent version of a new American fascist order that transforms the country into a white crystal fascist plutocratic version of Vladimir Putin's Russia or Viktor Orban's Hungary. Now, in a new essay at the New Republic, Anna Marie Cox makes this intervention. Now, don't fucking get me wrong, it is highly amusing to see the Republican donor pundit class make the same error that they did back in 2016, projecting their chattering class concerns onto an electorate as unconcerned with crassness as it is with baggage, and for that fucking matter, potential criminal charges. If conservative voters were really looking for politicians that supported Trump policies but were just more overtly racist and less embarrassingly fascistic, then Liz Cheney would still be representing Wyoming in Congress today. Now, others have observed the choice between the Satanists and Trump, and Trump is the equivalent of choosing between being stabbed or shot to death, or perhaps being blown up by a grenade. In a recent press release, the pro-democracy advocacy group, the Lincoln Project, summarized this false dichotomy perfectly. Don't be fooled by any conservative who tries to tell you that the Satanist is a more moderate version of Trump. He's just as evil and worse as Trump. The Satanist is far from being a moderate. He's trying to appeal to the same culture war-focused maggot base that Trump currently controls, and to win the hearts and minds of maggots, and to get them to move away from Trump, the Satanists would have to be an even more extreme version of Trump. And therein lies the danger of a Satanist nomination. In order for him to be successful, he has to be fucking extreme, and we do not want him to be successful. Now, by normalizing and laundering the Satanists, the mainstream news media is presenting neo-fascism and authoritarianism, and all of the human harm such policies have already and will cause to the American people on an even greater scale as something palatable. Now, in the end, there is no real choice between the Satanist and Trump. And to borrow from the end of the classic 1984 movie Ghostbusters, the American people are being asked to choose their form of their destructor. So basically, you got Trump, who destroyed America in 4 years, and then you got and then the Satanists possibly could be running, and he's going to be just as worse as Trump. Who knows how much destruction he's going to cause in 4 years if the Satanist gets elected. So basically, if you like the video, you can give the video a like and subscribe to my channel, RBW King. You can also hit the notification bell so that you'll be notified when a new video comes out. You go ahead and leave a comment. Let me know what you think. And if you want to support my work even further, you can donate to my Patreon link, which you can find in the About section of YouTube. And for just as little as a few bucks a month or video, your donation can help go a long way. And thanks for listening.